Since I've got a few minutes, Mr. Chairman, I want to move to another topic. Reconciliation, which you're very familiar with. And thank you for all your contributions to it, by the way, as we put together the bill. The American people may be a little confused about what reconciliation means. As you know, Mr. President, the reconciliation bill is just a budget bill. That's all it is. It deals with spending of taxpayer money. And why is it important? Well, first, it's going to be important to try to lower the prices that are gutting the American people like a fish. Inflation, President Biden's inflation was simply pernicious. I don't know of another word for it. It got to the point, I don't know about in your state, but in my state, you know, people shouldn't have to sell blood plasma to be able to go to the grocery store. They shouldn't. And make no mistake, we all know this, those high prices were man-made. And again, no disrespect, but that man's name was Joe Biden. And that's true. The first goal of our reconciliation bill is to try to help get those prices down. Now, how we're going to do that? Number one, we're going to reduce government spending. Why does that matter? Well, how did we get the inflation? We got the inflation because President Biden's favorite form of spending was more. I said many times, if the White House during President Biden's term had discovered life on Mars, they would have sent it money immediately. And it was all this money that they injected into the economy, trillions of dollars, the Inflation Reduction Act and the American Rescue Plan. They spent all this money, you had all this money that came into the economy chasing too few goods, created demand, supply constant, and we had inflation. So we're going to try to get those prices down, we meaning this Congress, by reducing the government spending, which will reduce the stimulus to the economy, which if we do it right ought to lower interest rates. That's step one that we're going to try to achieve in reconciliation. The second part of reconciliation, we're going to continue to try to reduce the rules and regulations. All these rules and regulations have a price. And when you're adding $2 trillion in costs that fall on the backs of businesswomen and businessmen, to stay in business, they've got to pass the costs of all those rules and regulations on to the consumer. So if we can get rid of some of these rules and regulations, like we're going to continue to do in a few minutes when we vote on the rule to get rid of the Biden rule I just talked about, if we can reduce the cost of reduce those rules and regulations, goods and services will cost less. The third thing we're going to try to do in reconciliation, or our budget bill, if you prefer that term, is redesign the tax code so that it looks like somebody designed it on purpose. Since 1990, average GDP growth in America has been 2% a year. Now that's just not acceptable. When we hit 2.5% now, GDP growth, we're so happy we want to go have a toga party. 2.5% is not acceptable. We've got to start growing again at a normal rate, used to be normal for America, of 3%. Now how are we going to do that? We're going to do that by encouraging businesswomen and businessmen to invest in their businesses and grow their businesses and hire more people. And the byproduct of that is that wages will go up. And that way people will be making more money. so they'll be able to afford this inflation that President Biden left with us. So the first goal of reconciliation is to try to reduce these prices, to try to kill inflation dead. But there's a second, equally, some would say more important reason. As you well know, Mr. President, in 2017, this Congress, during President Trump's first term, passed the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. We cut taxes by $4.3 trillion. And boy, did it work. The economy took off like a SpaceX rocket ship. Within a year, median household income in America had gone up $4,400. And people at the lower end of the wage scale enjoyed more tax benefits and more money in their pocket than people at the other end. That's why I have to laugh when my Democratic colleagues say, well, you know, this was a tax cut for the rich. No. All you have to do is look at the data. Unless you do your research on Twitter, you know that it helped people at the lower end of the wage scale more than those at the upper end. That's the good news. The bad news is that those tax cuts expire at the end of this year. So we're going to try to extend them and make them permanent in our reconciliation bill. And if we don't, then we're going to have a $4.3 trillion tax increase on the American people. $4.3 trillion. I want you to think about that, Mr. President, when some of our colleagues try to throw up roadblocks to our reconciliation bill. In effect, what they're saying is they want to raise taxes on the American people by $4.3 trillion. That's the most important thing we'll do in our reconciliation bill. It's not the only important thing, as I mentioned, but it's clearly the most important thing. If we raise taxes right now, $4.3 trillion on the American people, this economy will begin a journey to the center of the earth. We cannot let it happen. Now, I don't want to minimize the importance of the role that reconciliation will play in lowering prices and lowering inflation. That's important. But worse than inflation is depression. And if we don't extend these tax cuts and make them permanent, we're going to be in a depression. And that's really what the reconciliation bill is all about.